A lot more to talk about, so I want to bring in Jason Beardsley. He's a Special Operations Advisor for Concerned Veterans for America. Also, Peter Bergens, he's CNN National Security Analyst. Peter, if I could begin with you. We're hearing the family of Warren Weinstein expressing frustration today that the U.S. administration, as well as the Pakistani government, they singled them out, did not do enough to win their husbands, their fathers' release. You've written a piece now for CNN.com where you get into this and make the case that they're right, that no serious effort was made to negotiate for his release. What's behind that?
Well, I think for the U.S. government, the fact that he was being held by Al-Qaeda made it very problematic. The U.S. government position, as you know, is not to make concessions to terrorist groups and Al-Qaeda, in particular. I've talked to multiple Pakistani officials about the circumstances of all this. They said they did make an effort to go house to house in North Waziristan, where Warren Weinstein was believed to be held and where he was almost certainly killed in the drone strike in January. They said those came to no, they didn't have any result. They put feelers out to the Akani network, and I think this is a very important point, Jim, because the Akani network is now holding another American citizen, Caitlin Coleman, and her husband, Joshua Boyle, who's Canadian. Caitlin Coleman has probably had a kid in captivity whose name we don't know. And I think we should draw some lessons from this, which is we really need to work with the Pakistani government, with whom we have some leverage, to get Caitlin Coleman released. And that's going to, we're going to have to get in a situation where concessions are going to have to be made by somebody. We've had the example of a journalist who was released by an Al-Qaeda affiliate in Syria, Peter Theo Curtis. And that happened because the Qatari government intervened. And certainly it wasn't, Al-Qaeda didn't suddenly have a good day and just say, we're going to, release this guy. In any negotiation, you're going to have to make some form of concession. And the U.S. government should work with the Pakistani government to authorize some kind of deal that will allow other Americans and Canadians still being held in the area where Warren Weinstein was killed. Otherwise, you're just condemning them to certain death.
Yeah, I mean, in the last few months, we've seen all the options. When you have an American held hostage abroad by a terrorist group, we've seen the danger with all of them. Here you have the possibility of collateral damage. You strike somewhere, you had no idea they were there, you kill an American and an Italian. We had a rescue effort in Yemen that killed a South African hostage. The assault happened. He was killed by his hostage takers while that happened. You had a failed attempt for James Foley and other hostages in Syria. It is difficult to get right. Jason, today the president took full responsibility for this, even though he didn't order this particular strike. He apologized for it. How much of a intelligence failure is this, or are these circumstances, is there an element here that these circumstances of hostage taking are so difficult that mistakes happen when you're attempting to get these people free?
That's a great question. First of all, thank you for having me on. And secondly, we want our hearts go out to the grieving family of the Weinsteins right now. We share in their grief. These are very difficult operations. Every administration is faced with a complexity when we're facing hostage situations. Peter Bergen mentions this is in the tribal region of the Waziristan and northern Pakistan. These are difficult regions for the American intelligence community and military community to get fidelity on the targets. But what we see is when we don't have a good confidence, when we don't have a high amount of fidelity in what is happening on the ground, this remote capability to monitor these things leads us into a place where our consequences are generally high. Monitoring this compound and knowing that the compound is an Al-Qaeda compound is one thing, but having the confidence that this target that we're about to strike is going to result in an effect that is, first and foremost, puts the U.S. interest ahead of other interests is very important. We work very hard with our allies. We need to continue to emphasize what it means to have, one, human intelligence on the ground, two, great relations with our partners like Pakistan. So it requires a lot of work.
Well, Peter, the U.S. is about to pull out of Afghanistan. That drawdown is slowing down, and they will keep some assets there. But now you're looking at several countries where the U.S., if it doesn't have complete blind spots, it is blinder than it used to be. Pulled out a lot of assets from Yemen, where AQAP is, largely a blind spot in Syria, and until recently, more so in Iraq, until U.S. forces back on the ground there. All these countries where you have severe terror threats, is the U.S., by pulling out of these places, setting itself up for more intelligence failures like this going forward?
I think the short answer is yes. I mean, our plan to completely withdraw to accept a very small force at the end of December 2016 in Afghanistan, by definition, is going to impact our ability to kind of contain Al-Qaeda. And I think the administration, to its credit, is kind of stepping back from that policy a little bit, slowing down the pace of withdrawal. But I would like to see both Democrat and Republican candidates for the presidency say, hey, we're not going to turn off the lights in Afghanistan at the end of 2016, and put that in their platforms, because we've already run this videotape in Iraq and it was a disaster. Why would we do this again to ourselves when we can predict with some degree of fidelity what's actually going to happen if there's a total absence of American presence or very small American presence in Afghanistan? We're not talking about sustaining a big troop presence, but some kind of presence that is not just basically protecting our embassy in Kabul, I think is necessary.
No question. I mean, these are easy issues to snipe from the outside, but they require hard decisions. How many boots on the ground, American boots on the ground, the other risks that takes on. Big decisions coming forward. Jason Beardsley, Peter Bergen, great to have you both on today.